reduction in stress. And who doesn't need more of that? Teachers, if you're here, you know what I'm talking about. Hi lovely people, it's so nice to have you here. This is the third video in my little mini series about mindfulness. If you haven't already, there's a video about what mindfulness is and definitely isn't. The second little video is really short about different schools of thought. And this video, as promised, is going to outline some of the benefits of mindfulness. So here we go. As I mentioned before in one of the other videos, mindfulness is just a word that we hear all the time. So much so that it actually turns some people off from it and they just think it's this like commercialised McMindfulness. It's just airy-fairy and don't really want to know anything about it. But actually, like I've said so many times before, there's loads of different studies that talk about or that have been carried out with various findings about the benefits of mindfulness. So I've actually got them stuck in front of me because there's so many I couldn't remember them all in my head. The most famous one would be a reduction in stress. That's where John Kabat-Zinn's whole 8-week stress reduction program, if you follow it, all the people that in the trials and everything and subsequently in places like prisons, for medical teams, different things like that, the majority of findings show that there is a reduction in stress for those people. So there's like reports, self-report questionnaires, different methods to measure before and after. So these people, most of them or lots of the participants said that they felt a reduction in stress. And who doesn't need more of that? Teachers, if you're here, you know what I'm talking about. So a reduction in stress is a huge benefit. Also a reduction in anxiety. This is one of the reasons why I searched for something like mindfulness, which was a bit of an answer for me. There was a period of time in life I really just was anxious in terms of thoughts that would just constantly be around me, worrying about everything, and then that would lead to stress for me. So a way to help reduce anxiety in my life was some mindful practices. Bringing myself back to the present moment, taking deep breaths, noticing things around me and changing and shifting the focus away from those anxious thoughts to experience a more in the moment feeling and balance. So it's one that I can vouch for. I definitely found a reduction in anxiety in my life through mindful practice. Depression is another one there's quite a few studies on. Of course, anyone that has symptoms of depression and who see a professional psychologist or psychotherapist, psychiatrist, depression can be so debilitating for so many people, and quite often for some people mindfulness isn't the answer because they have different things they need to work through, and perhaps they're on medication and things, but then a professional would recommend mindfulness practices when they feel that it's time for them to help, or it can help that particular person. But having been someone that has had bouts of depression throughout my life, not throughout, I'd probably say my adult life is when I would say at times I can pinpoint I've experienced it, and also having support from psychologists. And I used to talk about my love of mindfulness and awareness of it, and they would just guide me back towards the practice because I know that that worked for me. So mindfulness was always something that would alleviate the depth of some depression that I'd experienced. But like I say, everyone is different, but it's definitely something that is mindfulness that can be connected to supporting you during times of depression. There's a lot of studies that talk about how mindfulness can reduce anger. Certain individuals, that's how they express emotions and it manifests in such a certain way, and people who then try mindfulness practices, they can see a reduction in anger because they're able to come back to the present moment, move away from that burst of emotion that can often impact other people, not just the person that's angry, but impact others. So it helps them see their anger and recognize it within themselves and notice the sensations and feelings that arise in that moment, and mindfulness can help reduce that when practiced effectively. And catastrophizing, this is a huge one for me. So catastrophizing is when you spiral from a thought and think about the worst possible thing that can happen. So an example for me would be years and years and years ago, I worked in a school and I had to write my reports. And for whatever reason, they didn't really fit the school at the time. So I got them back with lots of edits and different things. But because of who I was then and was at the beginning stages of mindfulness, or maybe hadn't even started properly by that point, the catastrophizing, it just spiraled. So it was like, gosh, these reports are coming back to me. Maybe I'm not very good at my job, maybe I'll lose my job, then I might have to move back to Scotland. What will I do then? You know, so it just catastrophized, it got bigger and bigger. But now I can safely say, and hand on heart say, that because I've got mindfulness in my life, that's catastrophizing isn't like it used to be. The odd time it might happen with something, but it's when it's something massive. But then I know I can recognise that that's what I'm doing, and mindfulness helps bring me back. Some deep breaths, maybe do some practices, mindful practices, do some meditation, and a different guided meditation. Meditation is another set of videos that I'll do. But mindfulness really helps me recognise, or more so back then, helped me recognise when I was beginning to catastrophize. So it's definitely something that's helped. So other benefits are mindfulness can really help you increase empathy for yourself and for others. And that's huge. Mindfulness has really supported me to consider myself as a being and someone worthy of love and support and care. Quite often, you've probably heard, like, speak to yourself the way that you would speak to your friends. So if my friend came up to me and said, you know, I'm really upset, I'm really down about this, and you know, the first thing you say is, oh, well, tell me how I can help, and you listen and things. But do we treat ourselves the same way? So since I've started mindfulness practice, or you know, a part of the process for me was listening to myself, accepting that I might feel a certain way, not judging myself for it, and really sitting with me like I'm my own friend, and having empathy for myself, the feelings that I'm going through, recognising myself as a person and a being the same way I would recognise someone else or a child in my class. So it's definitely a lovely thing for that, you know, bringing yourself to yourself. Trust is another one, being mindful. Mindfulness practices can help build trust. There's a few papers about that. And relationships, you know, relationships is a huge one. If you're, sorry, there's someone hammering on the ceiling. If you are in a relationship with a friend, or you have relationships like spouse, you have relationships with children in your class, it's just the whole world goes round on relationships. But if you can be mindfully present in those relationships and really reflect as well, I suppose, is another part, reflecting on things that have happened or things that you'd like to do. But being present for those people and yourself, you know, can really strengthen relationships. So I mentioned it in another video, if you're an educator and being really mindfully present with a child that's having a conversation with you. And sometimes they are like, and then it's my mum's birthday, and then I got new shoes, and they go on. But to them, it's like the biggest, most important thing, and they want to share it with you. So really giving my time and awareness to that conversation in all relationships can be hugely beneficial, not just for them but for you as well, and relationships can be really strengthened. Decision making, that's another one that I felt mindfulness really supported me with. I would say 10 years ago or so, a decision for me was very difficult, even if it was something that's so small, like, oh, should I have a chocolate hot fudge sundae from McDonald's or a strawberry one? You know, something as small as that used to get me really, but you know, thinking about the benefit. And I suppose that could be kind of connected to anxiety in a certain way about making the wrong choice. But mindfulness really supports with decision making, really brings you to the moment. You can focus how you feel when you think about both sides and help you weigh it up and decide and notice, be aware of how you feel about each element of the decision. So that's a nice one. Performance and attention, again, there's quite a lot of studies outlining how these things can be sharpened And that's initially part of the reason why I thought, well, that's great for children. You know, we all want them to pay attention and listen, but actually, who teaches them how to pay attention? What does paying attention actually mean? So thinking about that as an adult, what does paying attention mean for me? What does it look like? How does it feel? What are the sensations? So, you know, the more mindful practice that we do, it can rewire pathways, neurological pathways in the brain to be more helpful ones. If you're someone that's easily distracted, mindfulness practice eventually over time can help you really focus and be in the moment, so those distractions and those thoughts will pass through and not distract you so much. And again, remember, there's always that non-judgmental way about it. And positive emotions, I feel like mindfulness has really supported me with positive emotions. For example, gratitude, or a feeling of gratefulness or thankfulness. When I practice mindfulness, I notice more things to be grateful for, and who doesn't need more of that? You know, there's a lot of studies and things about how gratitude can boost in your overall subjective well-being through different positive psychology interventions. Again, mindfulness has really helped me recognize the positive emotions, because it can be quite easy to, when something goes wrong, feeling upset, sad, you know, lonely, different things, you can sit in it and it can consume you, and then it's often we can reflect back to that feeling and we really know what it feels like. But when you think about those really joyous, exuberant, exciting, happy moments in your life, can you draw on that emotion just as deeply as you can the sad ones? Can you bring it to you just the same? So think about it that way. That's a really lovely one to consider, how mindfulness can support you as well. So some ways to get started. How I started was, initially, I think I mentioned before, like gong meditation practices. Then I read a couple of books. My first experiences of mindfulness for myself were little guided mindful meditation sessions on YouTube. So I would just listen to like 10 minutes where you're guided into breathing practice, things like that. Then I actually did the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, which was 8 weeks. So I did that with some other teachers around Dubai, and we went each week for 8 weeks, and each session was 2 or 3 hours. And every day you had a practice to do in between them. So at the time it was interesting because there was a lot of teachers on the course who were in the middle of writing reports and different things like that. And you could see how the stress, we all talked about how the stress was just so present all the time. And so that course was really useful. There's actually a free online mindfulness-based stress reduction course. I'll put the link for that in the box below. And that's a way that you can start learning about more of the theory, and there's some practices that you can listen to as well. So that's something that I actually quite enjoyed. Fast forward, let me think, what else have I done to get started? Yeah, then I start thinking about mindful living. You know, I would start choosing little times throughout the day, like brushing my teeth or having a shower, and being mindfully aware in that moment, thinking about what I could notice around me as I did that. So brushing my teeth, I wouldn't be sitting thinking about what I've got to do tomorrow, and if I did start thinking about what the day was going to look like or thoughts passing through, then I would just bring myself back to centre. So then practice kind of deepened a bit more, moving away from little mindful activities like that to actual more mindful practice. So then I would start doing mindfulness each day, like the meditations that I talked about from the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, started doing them each day. Then when I went to India, mindfulness, meditation, these were all different classes that we did each day. So I just found that it really started to embed itself in every day in some form. I also really love the app Calm. I love the app Headspace. There's different, an Insights timer, that's a really good one as well. I'm not sponsored by any of these, I just want to share that they're really useful places to get started. So when you start looking through the apps, you'll see there's variants of meditation, and then mindfulness is in its own section. So again, you'll be able to see the differences between different types of meditation and mindfulness meditation. So there are some apps that are really great to start off with. If you're interested in trying some mindful activities with children, there's another couple of videos on the channel, so if you just have a look through, you'll see that there's some activities you can start with children. Before you, well, if you've been watching this series of videos up until now, you've already learned a little bit about the science, and you've kind of started to understand the definition of what mindfulness is. So then my advice would be, find what works for you, and I can assure you that when you begin, there are thoughts that will pass through like, oh, this is a bit difficult, I don't really like sitting on the floor, my back hurts, but remember that non-judgmental way. If those thoughts come through your mind when you're trying to do mindful meditation practice, it's okay, just let them drift through. It's not easy, mindfulness isn't an easy thing. Again, that's a misconception. It's like airy-fairy, you just lie down and be still and breathe. But actually it can be quite hard, but the benefits are tenfold, so I just outlined some of them for you today. Let me think, I've not missed anything. Another way to make sure that you get started and include mindfulness is carve out some time for yourself, even if it's only 10 minutes in a day. Just try and make sure that you include it as part of your lifestyle. As part of your well-being is to include some mindfulness practice throughout the day. I do this mindfulness practice in school. There's one called the 3-minute breathing space, and I can just find a video on YouTube, 3-minute breathing space, and sometimes at lunchtime, if the kids are out playing or whatever, I can just be in the cupboard for myself, 3 minutes, just take these deep breaths, and it almost quietens all the noise and all the busyness of the day and just lets me breathe and bring myself back to where I am, centre, and then get on with the rest of my day. So I hope this video was useful. If I've missed anything out, I'm sorry, let me know. Do click and subscribe to this channel. I'm hoping that I can provide more value as time goes on. If you're interested in learning more about mindfulness, there's a mindfulness module in my online course, Wellbeing in Primary Education. The course is suitable for adults in education and parents of primary age children. So the link's in the box. Thanks so much, and hopefully I'll see you next time.